deceit. Telling the truth is a revolutionary act. It's the David Knight Show.
As the clock strikes 13, it's Wednesday, the 26th of August, year of our Lord 2026. Well, we've had a major breakthrough in terms of exposing vaccine fraud that is linked to autism. And we're going to take a look at that, the history of that, and a major case that the real issue is not the fraud involved. We'll talk about what the fraud actually involved, but it's the research that was attached to that fraud that is fraudulent. And we're going to take a look at the death of Dolly Parton. What can we learn from her life and death? Meanwhile, we have Mark Levin and the constant drumbeat of Judaizers like Huckabee and now Dinesh D'Souza. We're going to take a look at that because all of us are one day going to stand before God. And just as Dolly Parton is, these people are trying to replace Christ with a perverted version of Mosaic law. We're going to talk about all that when we come back. Stay with us. Well, as everybody knows by now, Dolly Parton died yesterday, and she has a very large impression here in this area because she was from this area. They got a statue of her in downtown Sevierville. Of course, Dollywood is huge here. And as a matter of fact, they closed yesterday and their website was taken down. So many people were going to it to try to find information about her. I mean, you can get Dolly Parton license plates here in the state of Tennessee and so forth. So, I mean, I knew it was big here. It's not the genre of music that I follow, as you know, right? It's, as a matter of fact, when we were at my daughter's wedding, they started playing some music that was incredibly loud in another genre that I don't really like. And I started sticking paper in my ears because it was so loud. And the groom came over and asked me, so would you like us to play something else? And I said, well, do you have any John Williams? So it's not a knock on her music. As a matter of fact, there's a very charming video. If you have a chance to see it, look at it on YouTube. I saw that yesterday. And it was when she went on the Johnny Carson show. And she did a special song for Johnny. And it really showcased her talents, I think. You know, it was a very clever little song. It was self-deprecating about the character that she created. And she was aware that she was creating a character. She talked about her $13 wig and so forth. She was very well aware of what she was doing, and she created this larger-than-life persona. But and I'm not a big fan of big hair. Just say that. But the issue that we look at is I've seen a lot of very negative stuff on Twitter. And look, you can focus on a hand gesture here. You can focus on an offhand comment over there. And maybe those are real. Maybe they're unintentional. Maybe it's not really what we think it is. I'm not willing to sit here and judge somebody on something like that. I'll let Twitter do that. It's not my job to judge somebody's life. What we can do, however, is we can take a look at what they did. And so a lot of people were complaining about the fact that she was one of the celebrities that they used to push vaccines. And if you remember, this is what she had to say at the time. And it's really tragic. I'll talk about this.
Well, hey, it's me. I'm finally going to get my vaccine. I'm so excited. I've been waiting a while. I'm old enough to get it, and I'm smart enough to get it.
I'm old enough.
So I'm very happy that I'm going to get my Moderna shot today. And I wanted to tell everybody, I think you should get out there and do it too. I even changed one of my songs to fit the occasion. It goes, vaccine, 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 vaccine. I'm begging of you, please don't hesitate. Vaccine, 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 vaccine. 'Cause once you're dead, then that's a bit too late. I know I'm trying to be funny now, but I'm dead serious about the vaccine. I think we all want to get back to normal, whatever that is, and that would be a great shot in the arm, wouldn't it, if we could get back to that. But anyhow, I just wanted to encourage everybody, because the sooner we get to feeling better, the sooner we are going to get back to being normal. So I just want to say to all of you cowards out there, don't be such a chicken squat. Get out there and get shot. Anyway, that's my message to you. So I am going to call on my friend, Dr. Najia Boomrod, that's worked in research here at Vanderbilt. That's where I am today. And he's going to pop me in my arm. And so I'm going to call him in. I'm going to mask up first, though, because I have a pretty good distance from me on camera. So I'm going to try to put this on.
Might as well put your wig over your face.
Get my hair back around so I look good. You know, we got to look good. Okay, Dr. Najia, get in here and give me a shot. How are you?
Okay, that's all I can watch of this. But obviously, they're using her. Now, whether or not she was aware that this was something that was dangerous, I mean, there was a lack of discernment, certainly. And this is the danger. It's not about the hand signal here or the offhand remark or a word that, did she really say that? It's not about that at all, folks. It is what is right in your face. They use celebrities to create a cult. And people get attached to them for obvious reasons. She's very charming, very intelligent in terms of being an entertainer. And people, they use that, and they use her. And I think it was really a tragedy. I see her as much as anything else in this as a victim. Many people point out that her health issues began shortly after she got that vaccine. And perhaps her husband as well, who died a year ago. But I can't verify that one way or the other. I do know that it certainly did not help her health. It doesn't help anybody's health. It didn't help her to avoid some imaginary virus any more than that mask would. But they use entertainers, they use politicians because they want to get your trust. And so what can we learn from this? I'm not interested in judging her life one way or the other, but I am interested in getting people to not put blind trust into somebody because they like them, because that person can be misled as well. And I think that was the case. I think that, you hear this all, I think their heart was in the right place. But I really do think that when you look at the way Dollywood is run, and, we've been there once, and the day that we went there, it was incredibly busy. And it was so busy, they just did an announcement and said, we have so many people here today, we're going to stay open an extra 2 hours. It's just that kind of friendliness. The fact that it is perhaps the most economical of any of the amusement parks to go to. Certainly not money grubbing in the way that Disney is, not at all. And so there was just that kind of friendliness to it. And yes, she did give $1 million to Moderna to develop the vaccine through Vanderbilt. However, she also gave $1 million to the people who were suffering from the flood. And so I just get a sense that she was a very nice, likable person. Here's the thing. Everybody that knew her personally seems to have liked her. Nobody has a bad word to say about her who knew her personally. But that's exactly the kind of person that they want to use. And so don't be taken in by that. Don't, do your own due diligence. Don't trust a celebrity. Don't trust a politician. Don't trust a scientist in a white lab coat. Unfortunately, she did. So she was saying things like, well, I'm old enough to get it. She didn't realize that they designed this thing as a culling. I mean, they're looking at their Social Security insolvency. They needed something to do with that right away. And just remember that little historical footnote there that they were telling everybody, it doesn't affect the kids. You're going to kill grandma. You're going to kill the elderly people. So we're going to give them the vaccine first. That was the narrative that they created. It was insidious. But I think that her role in that was not necessarily something, I don't think that, and again, I don't know because I don't know her. But it's just my sense that she was not part of a plot to hurt people. I see people saying really harsh things about her. And I'm not going to say that. But I do think that it's another example for us to look at this and to say, I don't want to get involved in a cult of personality. That's what let Trump get away with so many things that he did. Let's talk about what's going on in another place here in Tennessee, again in Knoxville. We have Knox County Mayor, and again, that is the highest elected official in the county, They called mayor. He's not the mayor of Knoxville, but he's the mayor of Knox County. Glenn Jacobs, who you may remember as the wrestler Kane from WWE. And he's been pushing back in terms of the flock cameras, saying, we need to think about this, and please let's not put this through. Well, they had a meeting that was scheduled on Monday with the flock CEO. He was there to, it was going to be a public meeting. He was going to answer questions from elected officials and presumably from the public as well. He did not show up. And so they went ahead and began the meeting. And what surfaced out of the meeting was, after 2 hours of going over the details of what the county sheriff was doing, what they found was that he was structuring purchases. This is another thing for you to be aware of in your own jurisdictions. So they had a law that said, if you're going to spend more than $25,000 or more, you have to get authorization for that. So what did they do? They started making regular payments of $24,990. $10 below the threshold that would trigger a report. When we do that type of thing in terms of putting money into the bank or taking money out, they call that structuring. And that's a major crime. You know, Dennis Hastert, who was a pedophile for years, they never came after him. The statute of limitations ran out. And of course, Congress and other local officials said, oh, statute of limitations can't do anything about it. You write the statutes. You could change that. And if you change the statute of limitations, you can go back and get people for older crimes like that. Those crimes are still on the books. And so they could have come after Dennis Hastert for that. As a matter of fact, we saw California and New York have a temporary moratorium on the statute of limitations for pedophile and child abuse. And we saw a lot of musicians and actors and people in the entertainment world, right? We saw a lot of them accused. There was the famous case of the Romeo and Juliet movie. You had, I'm trying to remember, Franco Zeffirelli, who did that. And they claimed that he tricked them into and coerced them into appearing naked in the film when they were minors. And unfortunately, they didn't win. It's difficult to win when it's decades. So they sued Paramount because that was the film company that did it, and Franco Zeffirelli was long dead at that point in time. Nevertheless, you had a lot of musicians and movie studios and high-profile entertainment people who were sued over that temporary moratorium. And then they brought back the statute of limitations. So they could have done something about that with Dennis Hastert. Instead, they came after him because he was structuring deposits to try to avoid questions from the bank. They asked him some questions when he started taking money out to pay off a guy that was blackmailing him over what Dennis Hastert had done to him. And again, Dennis Hastert, if you don't remember, the longest serving Speaker of the House, a Republican. And I would argue that they all knew about it. It's why he got to be a congressman and the Speaker of the House. They never came after him for the pedophilia, but they locked him up for structuring withdrawals, not even deposits, but withdrawals, which I thought was really strange. But here's a sheriff who is structuring the payments to Flock to avoid having to report it to anybody. He's doing it surreptitiously. These are the same people, by the way. We've got this big press move here with local papers in Tennessee, as well as with the Sheriff's and Police Association here in Tennessee saying, trust us. We're going to make you safer. You can trust us. That's what they do. They're getting this stuff secretly, structuring the payments. You cannot trust them. There's certain things that they shouldn't have. There's certain powers that they shouldn't have, right? Would we, let's say that you got a sheriff's department that wants, they have a lot of military equipment like armored personnel carriers. Maybe they want a nuclear weapon. And you would say, no, you can't have a nuclear weapon. There's no reason you should have that. There's no good reason for you to have that. And it's too dangerous to entrust that to you. Same thing is true of AI and flock cameras. It's like giving them a nuclear weapon for a police state. So they should never have it. And you already see at the very beginning, they have compromised this. Now, there's another meeting coming up if you're in the area on October the 31st. So you may want to go to that. The total amount spent for the original 2020 deal blew past the limits that should have gone through the full commission approval. And so Glenn Jacobs is saying, as the mayor, I'm not going to approve this. I'm going to say this is not legit, because even though you made the smaller payments, when you look at the cumulative total, you have exceeded the amount that you can spend without getting the approval of the commission. So there's a fight developing there, and we'll be interested to see how this happens. But it just shows the underhandedness that this is a temptation, folks, of power. And it is, they should call it the Boromir system, just so everybody understands. Power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely, and this is absolutely going to corrupt the police. No question about it. When you look at the shock gloves, as I was talking about, as I said the other day, that is something that the police should not have. We have seen how that's been abused in prisons. Guess what? Those other prisons that we send our kids to, called schools, the Nebraska School District is asking the police to please stop using shock gloves on students. How about that? Isn't that amazing? I mean, I look at this, I'm thinking, the police, they're using shock gloves. I went to school at a time when we didn't have security officers. We did not have police officers in the schools. Imagine that. And it was much safer. That is not making us safer, just like the drug war does not make us safer. The drug war does not get us off of drugs. These are two different issues. So the Omaha police agreed to stop carrying electric shock gloves in the halls of the state's largest public school district. In the hallway, right? I mean, we did this as a joke. We had there was a guy when we went out of town on a band concert competition. We went for state competition up in the Panhandle of Florida when I lived in Tampa, and we knew a guy, and he was real big on experimenting with electricity, and he could handle a lot of juice. And so what he did was he rigged up the door with alligator clips. He grabbed and the other part of it was the striker on the door plate, and when he closed the door, it completed the circuit. And if you touched the doorknob, you get a pretty big shock. I was not accustomed to that. He was. And interestingly enough, his name was Hyde, and like Mr. Hyde. So he was doing that and standing in the hallway and grabbing people as they would walk by and shocking them. Maybe that's what the police are doing. I don't know. People started getting wise to that and saying, avoid that area. So he started calling people, calling their rooms and telling them to come by. He said, don't knock, just come on in. And he actually, to make it work better, he put some water on the concrete there in front of the door. I was looking out the window laughing about it, and he came inside and he shut the door and he grabbed the doorknob and he grabbed my shoulder. I felt like I'd been shot. Yeah, I guess when you look at these, this is a bunch of Mr. Hydes that are grabbing kids in the hallway. I don't know. It's an insane world, isn't it? What a third world hellhole we are turning into. And it's because of the police surveillance state, just metastasizing. Well, one MAGA influencer has been outed as a Pentagon employee in a bizarre turn after botching a scoop State Department spokesman gave her. So this person is Jessica Pounds. She is a MAGA influencer known on social media as Data Republican. We look at these social media influencers. Remember the initial release, supposedly, of all the Epstein documents, how they had this hand-picked group of propagandists, they call them influencers, who went up there and they got the documents. You had Mike Cernovich and other people like that, the woman who is libs of TikTok. And it was just window dressing. That's the way they use these people. Well, they handed her some information. And of course, we've seen a lot of people like this. I mean, when I was at InfoWars, you had people like Jack Posobiec, who was a spokesperson for the government, posing as an influencer and as a journalist. You had people like Steve Pieczenik, who was on it. So I've seen this type of thing over and over again. She was part of Pete Hegseth's Pentagon press pool. And she just resigned that and became a State Department employee. And then she was handed some documents. And she said, I got very suspicious. I saw this extra writing on it, and I thought they were trying to set me up, trying to frame me. And so the person who gave her the information said, no, that is not those markups that are there. It's not, the markings are FOIA redactions that are required even for voluntary disclosure. And to prove this isn't a trap, I'll release it myself. And here it is. And so she got all freaked out about the fact that, hey, I've worked with these people. They're trying to set me up. They gave me these documents with extra markings on them. And she didn't know what they meant. And so she goes public criticizing them rather than contacting them. And so the whole thing blew up in her face and in their face as well, as a matter of fact. She'd previously worked with Elon Musk's Doge nonsense. She is deaf. And as I put it here, nonverbal, but I would say that she is dumb in the other sense, not in the sense that she can't speak. But we're seeing this happening over and over again, and it is the total spectrum of control that is there. It's truly amazing. It's not, when you look at all the bots that are on social media, when you look at all the influencers on social media, when you look at the governments that are running them, the U.S., Israel, and these other people, spending hundreds of millions of dollars to pay these people to say this or to say that. It truly is amazing. Yeah, I think I saw some of that where I used to work. Anyway, Girl Scouts. Girl Scouts in America are taking a deep dive into promotion of Islam. You can get a Girl Scout badge for your learning Islam. You can get a Muslim badge, an Islamic badge. They have endorsed, in the Girl Scouts of America, they've endorsed transgenderism. They've endorsed abortion. Now they want the kids to learn the pillars of Islam. And as one person said, they have a badge for the key concepts of the Declaration of Independence. Or do they have a badge if you learn the Bill of Rights? No, they don't have any of that. But this is something that's been happening for a very long time. One of the fights I had with Alex was over the very first announced pick of Trump in terms of his cabinet. He was elected in November, of course, and then over the Christmas break, he starts talking about how he's going to put in Rex Tillerson. Strong indications from mainstream media that that's going to be his pick for Secretary of State. And so I tweeted at Trump and I tweeted at Alex. I said, you do know this guy's background, right? You do know that he's a big climate change pusher. And you do know that he pushed the Boy Scouts into the homosexual camp, right? And Alex got really angry at me that I would include him in that and send that to Trump. And so, it's, and we saw how that turned out, didn't we? Yeah. At first, when Rex Tillerson was head of the Boy Scouts, they started accepting homosexual scouts. In no time at all, they had homosexual scout leaders taking a group of boys out into the woods to camp. No problem there, right? Just amazing. Rex Tillerson started all this stuff, and now the Girl Scouts are taking this even further. And again, be very careful about the kinds of institutions that you put your kids into.
It really is extremely funny because the first thing that Islam would do would be to dissolve things like the Girl Scouts. Mm-hmm. The way you can just get these women on board with fighting for something that is so utterly antithetical to what they want and what they believe, and they'll just sign right on.
That's right. Yeah, you can, but if you get your badge, you can go to their mosque and you can have, you can learn all about Ramadan. You can wear a hijab. They have a hijab photo booth, which is really popular with the young girls. They can all dress up like oppressed Muslim women.
Well, Islam does seem to like 9-year-old girls, so maybe.
That's right. So they're looking for some wives. Who knows? There's 4 troops of 30 girls that began doing this in California. This was in Central California. Also, you see it in Naperville as well as in Virginia, Brooklyn, San Diego. It's popping up everywhere. They have Ramadan sleepovers that involve fasting and girls praying through the night and going to the hijab photo booth. Well, again, they may be looking for wives, but there's a lot of young men who are looking for wives. This is kind of a sign of the times, I think. This is on LifeSite News. The number of unmarried young men surges to 47% in the U.S. And this is since the year 2000, a huge increase. And when you add in the decline in marriage, in other words, people who got married and then their marriage is broken up, it's another 15%. So there's very few men who are married in the ages of 20 to 39. And so over the past 25 years, this has really expanded. It went 25 years ago, it was 2.5 million. Now we have 15 million men in this area. So now 6-fold the number of men who've never been married. And of course, what is behind all of this? I really do think that it is the institutions. When you look at what the institutions have been able to do, the educational institutions, K through 12, but especially college, what happens is they have actively turned women against men. It used to always in the past. I mean, this has been the most major reversal, I would say, in my lifetime of things that I've seen perverted and destroyed. And that is the idea that it was always the women who were chasing men. It was always the women who wanted to be married. And now it's the other way around. They actually despise men and they don't want to be married. And this is something that has really been drilled into them in entertainment, in educational institutions, and so forth. So yeah, the married adults consistently report being happier than their unmarried peers, but the sheer number of young men foregoing marriage could be adding to the happiness crash, they say, that is now unfolding among young adults across America. Yeah, I'm reminded of that song, if you want to be happy for the rest of your life. Well, that song says, never make a pretty woman your wife. I would say never make a college woman your wife. At that point in time, if they've gone through, they've been pretty well brainwashed, and you're going to have a lot of brainwashing to undo if you can do that. But I would just continue to say, from my personal point of view, get a Christian girl to marry you. That's what you need to be looking for out there. They say that happiness among married young adults even fell from 94% to 90%, which is kind of interesting. That's very high, isn't it? Very high percentage of people who are happy, even though it is trending downward. Some of that is going to be based on how much emphasis they put on money in their marriage, I think. Well, the Treasury has doubled the size of its buybacks, as I pointed out yesterday. And as one person points out, they don't want it to be seen as printing money because people remember what happened after COVID. So they're coming up with these alternative names for it. By any other name, right? It's just pulling the wool over people's eyes. And, the other part of this is pulling the wool over people's eyes. I've mentioned this many times. You look at Bessent, Scott Bessent. This is the guy who was Soros's right-hand man. This is the guy who helped him to break the Bank of England. Why is this somebody that we should trust? Why is it that MAGA, who is always ferreting out connections to this person or that person, look, they're connected to this Soros group that is connected to another group that's connected to another group. I mean, they will go several levels down in order to make these connections to George Soros. But when there is an absolute direct connection at the top, very close. But if it's Donald Trump, they don't care. It's just kind of everything else. If it's Trump, oh no, that can't be wrong. And so we're going to not have a problem with Scott Bessent. Well, the problem is that because of this narrowly defined bubble that we have in AI, as this person is pointing out, he says, well, most people may not realize it, but you might be at least half of your 401k is likely in AI stock because that is so much of the stock market. The 10 biggest companies, by the way, in the Standard & Poor's 500 are roughly 41% of the index. In 1990, they were only 19%. And at the very top of the tech bubble, the dot-com bubble, it was 26.5%. Now we're at 41%. That's how narrow the stock market is at this point. And so the Fed data puts the equities at about 42% of household financials. At the time of the dot-com high, it was only 38.4%. So we've exceeded that, 42% instead of 38%. And he said, this is the thing that's been nagging me all week. Somebody buys physical gold because they don't trust the system, but the biggest portion of their money is sitting in one of the most concentrated markets that we have ever seen. And, when we look at things like price earnings evaluation and that type of thing, we've never seen a market that is this inflated. Worse than 2008, worse than 1929, worse, as the Bank of International Settlement said, worse than the big market mania that we had around railroads or electricity going back to the last century and about 150 years ago. We're going to take a quick break, folks, and we will be right back. When we come back, we're going to be talking about what's going on with some of the issues with the flock cameras. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
You're listening to The David Knight Show.
Hello, it's me, Volodymyr Zelensky. I'm so tired of wearing these same t-shirts everywhere for years. You'd think with all the billions I've skimmed off America, I could dress better. And I could, if only David Knight would send me one of his beautiful gray MacGuffin hoodies or a new black t-shirt with the MacGuffin logo in blue. But he told me to get lost. Maybe one of you American suckers can buy me some at thedavidknightshow.com. You should be able to buy me several hundred. Those amazing sand-colored microphone hoodies are so beautiful. I'd wear something other than green military cosplay to my various galas and social events. If you want to save on shipping, just put it in the next package of bombs and missiles coming from the USA.
All right, welcome back. I said we were going to talk about flock stuff, but actually I want to move on to the pharmaceutical stuff because there's a key bit of news here that will be, I think, a debunking of the vaccine autism story that the CDC has put out there. They put out, and I'll tell you how broad this was. Some of the people whose children were affected by this, of course, are scientists, and they wanted some answers. But because of the fraudulent, quote-unquote, science of Paul Thornton and many others at the CDC, they wound up denying claims to more than 5,000 families who had parents with had children with autism that had been injured by the vaccines. And it's his study that is fraudulent that has been quoted over and over again. So it's going to be a very big story, I think. But before we do that, I just want to thank Stealth Patriot. Thank you very much for the tip. He said, I was clueless about vaccines until several years before COVID came out and questioned a friend who homeschooled his children and was anti-vax. I did my own research and I was shocked. Yeah, me too. Me too. And that was where I first started hearing stuff like that. And the thing that really sealed it for me, and I think is one of the reasons why Dr. Andrew Wakefield did his movie, he did a dramatization of families and how they're affected by this 1986 legal immunity that Fauci and Reagan gave to the pharmaceutical industries over the damage that they were doing to kids with vaccines. And when I saw that, of course, the big issue is, why do they need that? Well, they need that because even though they only had a handful of vaccines at the time, they weren't giving them 4 or 5 times each. They were still hurting kids so much that they needed to have legal immunity or they're going to go out of business. And so why are they the one industry that gets legal immunity? And how can they be allowed to harm children and be given legal immunity? There's something wrong with this. So that's where I started digging with it. And so this guy is a former CDC scientist, and he is now going to plead guilty. They've got all the information on him. They had him extradited from a foreign country. He faces 2 counts of wire fraud, 9 counts of money laundering related to over $1 million in CDC grant money that he didn't use for research. See, he didn't have a legitimate study at all. They just put out the narrative that the vaccine companies and CDC, which is the biggest vaccine reseller out there, they wanted a narrative that vaccines don't cause autism. So it's like, fine, yeah, let's pretend that we're doing research. Give me some federal money and a grant. And what he did was he bought a home, 2 cars, and a motorcycle with it. And then he left the country. He's been held in federal custody without bail since his extradition from Germany to the U.S. in May. Researcher James Grunwig, the parent of a child with autism who has been vaccine injured, called the expected guilty plea a very big deal. He's written a book called Master Manipulator, The Explosive True Story of Fraud, Embezzlement, and Government Betrayal at the CDC. And it is focused on this very case. So this is a father who is a researcher. His child was damaged by the vaccines. He knows it was the case. He investigated this guy, and he's got an entire book on it. He likely understands that the FBI and U.S. Department of Justice will have all the goods to prosecute him, so he pled guilty. He said, I guess Thorson's realizing since he's in an American jail already and has no chance for bail, he might as well make a plea deal. Another physician that Trump nominated, of course, if you remember, Dave Weldon, remember the name Dave Weldon? He was nominated by Trump to lead the CDC in late 2024. He faced some stiff opposition from Senator Cassidy out of Louisiana, because this guy is the ultimate vaccine shill, Cassidy is. And so they pulled Dave Weldon's nomination. The person they now have then there at the CDC is one of the biggest supporters they've ever had of vaccines. This is the way it works with Trump. He'll put somebody in, and everybody will cheer. And, oh, yeah, look at this. He's got a great guy, Dave Weldon. He's spoken out about the issues with vaccines. And then they pull him out, they put in somebody else. And that's the way it goes. People don't realize what is truly happening in the Trump administration. It'd be a miscarriage of justice, said Dave Weldon, if a plea deal failed to include a thorough investigation of allegations of scientific fraud. In other words, he took all this money and he didn't use it for research. Okay, so we're going to get him for wire fraud and money fraud and all these other financial crimes. But the real crime is that he didn't do the research, but pretended that he did. And he put out this fake data, which then the government used to refuse any help to over 5,000 families. And it gets worse. An obvious question is whether he's been cheating with this data to achieve the results that he sought for a long time. Investigation may implicate more people. Also, the controversial autism research that he helped to publish in 2002, 2003, that was cited as proof over and over again of no link between vaccines and autism. And again, at the center of this were the complaints and the issues about thimerosal. Thimerosal, folks, is mercury. This is barbaric. It is not science. This is actually barbaric. You know, we go back and we look at what they did to George Washington when he caught a cold riding around his estate in the winter. They called in a physician, and he started bleeding him to death, and then they gave him mercury as well. There's no way he's going to escape that. And we're going to look at this type of stuff that's being done by the CDC, the vaccines, and many other things that are being done in medicine right now in terms of cancer treatments and things like that. We're going to go back. We're going to look at that as being some of the most barbaric stuff that was ever done. This is Dark Ages type of stuff. This is not science. I think it's going to be the second part of the story, said Grundvig. He said it could be an avalanche of bad news for pharma and for the CDC. Despite questions around how those studies were conducted, the papers that were used in 2011 to dismiss over 5,000 claims filed by the parents of autistic vaccine-injured children. And he points out in his book, he said he is a world-class villain whose manipulation of health data gave CDC and Big Pharma what they wanted, a report that cleared thimerosal of any possible role in the autism crisis. How could you possibly say that injecting mercury into children is not an issue? And again, I've told the story before, but I tried soft contact lenses at one point in time when I was in college, and my eyes would just turn blood red, and I couldn't handle the cleaning solution that was there. And about 20 years later, Karen wanted me to try contacts again, and I talked to the optician, and I said, I really couldn't handle it. I said, I think it was the cleaning solution. He goes, oh, well, that has thimerosal in it. He said, we don't do that anymore. He said, that's mercury. And it's like, well, no wonder. But if I can put thimerosal in my eyes, it turns them blood red and they're stinging. Can you imagine injecting that and injecting it into a child? Many of them who don't have a fully developed immune system even. So the real crime is not absconding with research dollars, but it's the unresolved allegations around his purported research that he didn't do with those dollars, which served as the basis for the CDC and the U.S. government dismissing the injury cases by over 5,000 injured children. So all of those vaccine omnibus proceedings were completely fraudulent because they were based on a fraud. Again, this is like the legal doctrine of something is based on a poisonous tree, right? The fruit of a poisonous tree. You start out with the beginning of your criminal proceedings, and you do something to not follow due process with the individual, or you have manufactured some data for your case, Well, the whole thing then becomes poison, and it's rules to overthrow all of that. And this is the case as well. And so Brian Hooker, who I've interviewed from Children's Self-Defense, also had a son, who was injured by vaccines, autistic. His claim was also dismissed. He said Thornton likely didn't act alone in misusing this federal money or misinterpreting the vaccine autism research. The role of some of his key collaborators should also be examined. There should be a separate investigation against Dr. Diana Schendel, who was Thornton's direct grant supervisor and his lover. And the two of them went to Europe after all of this stuff, I guess, to celebrate. But anyway, she approved all of his fake invoices. She undoubtedly knew of his activities, but didn't report them to the authorities. And she could have spent some of the stolen grant money as well, said Dr. Hooker. Schendel maintained an inappropriate romantic relationship with him, and later accepted a position at Denmark University, continuing autism research there. Got to get out of the country. Thornton lived in Denmark for years after 2011. He was indicted in 2011, as a matter of fact. He worked there as a gynecologist, despite an extradition treaty between the two countries and an Interpol warrant for his arrest. But evidently he got comfortable enough in Denmark, who would not extradite him, that I guess he went to Germany, and they were all about that. They're all about law and order. So they extradited him. Other co-conspirators who knew of the inappropriate relationship between Thornton and his supervisor lover, Schendel, over the 7-year grant history at the CDC include two other individuals who are still at the CDC. Now, these individuals, at a minimum, should be brought in for questioning. Both have been implicated in the MMR autism fraud from the Stefano 2004 paper, where data showing a strong relationship between MMR timing and autism in black boys was illegally destroyed. And it is very clear it's a greater risk for boys than it is for girls. And they showed that for black boys, it was the greatest risk. And that information was removed by these people who are still at the CDC. One of them is the former director for the National Center for Birth Defects and Developmental Disabilities. And so by the early 2000s, Thornton, the guy who is now looking at a jail term, shifted his focus to autism research. His work in the area left a strong imprint, fueling future narratives that autism is not linked to vaccines, based on his non-existent research. One of the most influential studies became known as the Madsen study, a population-based study of measles, mumps, rubella, the MMR vaccine, and of autism. It was published in 2002 in the New England Journal of Medicine, co-authored by Thornton. The Madsen study concluded that there is strong evidence against the hypothesis that MMR vaccination causes autism, except he didn't do the research. They said this was flawed from the outset because researchers reviewed clinical records of only 40 of the 316 children who had autism in the study's cohort. Everything about this was flawed.
And you can bet that the ones they chose to review were handpicked.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, right now
they didn't just go in there at random and say, oh, well.
Yeah, this is not getting any exposure in the mainstream press. What is getting exposure even in the, as we'll call it, the alt-stream press, what is getting exposure? Oh, look, we had 2 kids die in Pennsylvania. First time that has happened in decades. Growing up, we didn't have any measles vaccines. Everybody got measles. I never heard of anyone dying. I'm not saying it didn't happen. It might have happened as a complication. I don't know. The narrative at the time when we were growing up was you want to get these things over with when you're a kid, because if you're an adult, it's harder for you if you get sick like that. Nevertheless, we've had other cases, and Children's Health Defense was very instrumental in debunking a couple of reported deaths that happened out in the Southwest. I forget where it was, if it was New Mexico or Utah, but they debunked those cases. We'll wait and see what happens about these purported 2 deaths of based on measles that are supposedly happened in Pennsylvania. I have my doubts. Again, thimerosal is a mercury-based adjuvant and irritant. It's something that is designed to irritate your immune system. And unfortunately for many people, it does permanent damage. And this is something that we've talked about over and over again. Well, Dr. Jane Ruby was talking about what the Navy is doing. Remember, the Navy is mandating these the mRNA flu shots. And yet, at the same time, they're putting out a clip bragging about how they love their Marines. And if you were kicked out because you didn't want to take the jab, we understand the problem. And, Pete Hegseth is on it, right? And he wants you back.
Fellow Marines, to those who were separated due to the COVID-19 vaccine mandate, thank you for your service to our nation and to our Corps. Your commitment mattered then, and it still matters today. Following the President's recent executive order, the Marine Corps moved out smartly to establish the COVID-19 reinstatement cell and create a clear, streamlined path for eligible Marines to return to service. We didn't simply meet the intent of the executive order, we trailblazed this effort across the Department of the Navy, setting the standard of excellence for how eligible service members can return to service through deliberate planning, personal outreach, and an unwavering commitment to our ethos and core values. Our team personally contacted 100% of the 3,748 eligible veteran Marines, ensuring every Marine understood the process and had a clear opportunity to return. Most importantly, since the executive order was signed, we've welcomed 53 Marines back into the Marine Corps, restoring experienced warfighters to our ranks and strengthening the readiness of our force. Today, the Marine Corps continues to exceed its recruiting and retention goals because Americans still want to take up the challenge of earning the title Marines, and Marines still want to stay on the team and in the fight. Our readiness is strong, but so is our commitment to ensuring eligible veteran Marines have the opportunity to return. If you still meet our high standards, the high standards expected of every Marine, we're ready to welcome you back. If you've been considering returning, I encourage...
Yeah, they've got your back, don't they? And they will stab you in it or in your shoulder. I don't know, but... Yeah, think about that. We've contacted, what did he say? Was it 3,700, Travis?
3,748, I believe.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, and of that, they've had 50 people say, yeah, we'll come back. Fool me once, shame on you. But anyway, that is truly astounding that they're trumpeting how great, they really are looking out for you. Meanwhile, the Navy, which the Marine Corps is underneath, is mandating these flu shots. Well, for people who've been damaged, just a reminder, this is just put out again by Expose. This is something, a protocol that Dr. Peter McCullough I talked about 3 years ago. And again, you can check to see what he has. He said, when people contact him about these vaccines, it's like, what do I do to mitigate the damage that's been done by this thing? How do I get this stuff out of me? Well, one of the things that's been put forward as perhaps being an effective treatment is nattokinase. Or nattokinase, I guess is the way you pronounce it. It is a fibrinolytic enzyme that's extracted from natto, which is a Japanese food made from fermented soybeans. Actually, it's something that I take. There's a lot of research showing that it's pretty effective in terms of managing blood clots, in terms of clearing out arteries as well. And so when you look at something I have to be concerned about, I don't want to take the Pfizer drug, Eliquis. So I was looking at something else that was going to protect against blood clots, which is a threat when you have AFib. I do have AFib. And so it helps to break down the clots that are there and help improve blood circulation. That's something that's been known for quite some time. And so that is also one of the things that first surfaced with the vaccine. So that has been recommended by many people as a way to get out of this, just a heads up for you when we look at these types of issues. We're going to take a quick break and, actually, we'll wait to the top of the hour here. Let me go ahead and start on this. I want to start talking a little bit about what is happening with the war in Israel, and what is happening as people see our government being taken over. I mean, I'm seeing one testimonial after the other on Twitter. People say, well, I always just thought that they were the victims. I thought, certainly I'm not saying that the Islamic terrorists are good guys either. But they were always portrayed as our strongest ally, the only democracy in the Middle East, and on and on. That was the popular approach. But now we see what has been happening with the ongoing attacks against civilians. And as you've had some people point out, and it's true that they don't have, the people in Gaza do not have an army, they don't have a navy, they don't have planes, all the different things that Trump is saying that he's taken from Iran. Well, they never had them. And they couldn't do the kind of damage that we saw happening on October the 7th. Only the Israelis had that kind of equipment to do that. And so as this thing is continuing to metastasize, it's not just that they're continuing to do this in Gaza. It's not just that you got Ben-Gvir saying, I want 30 to 40 people assassinated in Gaza every day, civilians, targeting civilians. And again, why would any American ever support the targeting of civilians? I know we've gotten accustomed to it since World War II. At the beginning of World War II, it was infamy to do that. It was infamy when Pearl Harbor did a sneak attack. And at Pearl Harbor, folks, the Japanese didn't attack and target civilians. They were attacking the ships. They were attacking military targets. But now it is, we start the wars, we do the initial attack, the sneak attack, and we target civilians as well. Everything about the way that we conduct the wars is just antithetical to Christian Western civilization. And so we need to ask, under whose ethics, whose morals, whose laws are we really operating? And it keeps coming back to the Zionists, who really do have a program, as I pointed out yesterday. This is Dr. Mark Perlmutter, and he is Jewish, and he breaks down really what is the essence of Zionism.
None of it is true, and you are all anti-Semites for saying it. Now, you're a Jewish American doctor. So what's your response to that?
So I have Jewish heritage. I'm agnostic myself. But it's not about Muslims versus Jews. This has never, ever, since the 1930s, when this actually started, it has never been a Muslim versus Jew event. Modern Zionism since the 40s has evolved into simply, I want your land and I'm willing to kill your children to get it. And that's what we're seeing,
right.
Plain and simple.
That's right.
It is not a fictitious collection of Islamic jihadists. It is not Islamic terrorists. And indeed, the terrorism in the Middle East was started by Zionists, and it's continued by Zionists, fully with American government support, by the way. The United States Congress building is the most occupied territory by Israel. It's not the West Bank. It's not Gaza. It's the U.S. Congress building. And they own our legislatures, including Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer, which I hope get voted out of office. So they're all prostitutes for the Israeli lobby.
All right, that is very clear.
It is Zionist-occupied government, isn't it, in Washington? Well, just take a look at what is happening in Lebanon. This is instructive as well for people who still don't understand what is happening. The IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, is preparing for a, quote, long-term stay in occupied southern Lebanon. Defense Minister Israel Katz has now also ordered them to escalate the rate at which they are destroying what is being framed as, quote, Hezbollah infrastructure across the south. And yet this is coming across in Christian villages. They say, well, any of these villages whose religion is Shiite, they are obviously terrorists, and they are what the Israeli Defense Force is calling a Hezbollah fortress. They present the ongoing demolition of those villages as an engineering activity. The engineering being explosions, heavy artillery fire, and increasingly the deployment of incendiary white phosphorus munitions to set fires in the villages and the surrounding areas. But as they're not focused strictly on even Islamic villages, they're also moving out to a lot of Christian villages, and there are a lot of Christians in Lebanon. They're not faring too well. We have seen the vandalism, the hatred of the IDF displayed in Lebanon over and over again. Here's another example of it. Look at this. This is a couple of troops here. They're inside a Christian church building here. And in just a moment, you're going to see what it looks like after they finished it. Here they are. They're torn everything down, vandalizing that building. That is nothing other than their racist hatred of anybody who is a different ethnicity, anybody who is a different religion. They feel justified in destroying this. Katz has made it clear that a number of the villages in the southernmost part of Lebanon will simply have to, quote, disappear. Israel has allowed a handful of non-Shiite villages to remain, but local leaders have reported that the IDF has warned them that if anyone in the village was armed, the entire village population would be expelled and the buildings destroyed. These are Nazi tactics. These are Nazi-style recriminations. Remember, go back to World War II. They find a gun, or they have an assassination attempt even. It doesn't even have to be successful on a Nazi leader. They kill all the men in the village. That's what these guys are doing. Except they're not killing all the men. They're killing all the men, women, and children and destroying the village. Obeying the occupiers doesn't mean that the villagers can live as they would in peacetime. The village economy is based heavily around farming and olive orchards. But the Israeli troops regularly restrict the villagers' access to their own land because they're stealing it. And they're willing to kill anybody, men, women, or children, in order to steal that land. And again, as I mentioned before, only about 1% of the world's population is allergic to olive pollen. And yet about 2/3 of Israelis are allergic to it. Maybe they're not from that area. Maybe that part of it is a lie as well. Again, I played for you Dr. Perlmutter, who said Israel's influence over Washington is so extensive that the U.S. Congress is the most occupied place anywhere, more so even than Gaza. And they are destroying not only our government, but they're destroying our Bill of Rights. They're leading us into one war after the other. Wary of a backlash, as a matter of fact, pro-Israel GOP Senate hopeful has asked AIPAC not to spend on his behalf. And again, this is Mike Rogers, who spent years on the House Intelligence Committee hearings. He's somebody who never saw any police state surveillance device that he didn't love. And he has made some of the most outrageous statements against due process, against privacy, against liberty that I've ever seen, coming from Mike Rogers. Now he's running for Senate, and he's running against El Sayed, this guy who is being portrayed in the press as a radical communist. Maybe he is. Most likely he is. But also a Muslim who is anti-Israel. And so Mike Rogers is very concerned about this, having taken so much money from Israel. As a matter of fact, speaking of taking money, Darlene, we go back, I guess you had Jolene changed to vaccine. I guess we could also sing the Darlene, Darlene, Darlene. Don't take that money from Israel. She took $2.5 million. They know they've got a ready-made puppet in her, and Trump knows that as well. So they'll tell Trump what to do. Trump will tell her what to do, and she'll salute and ask how high you want me to jump. So we have seen how she conducted herself during the pandemic as well. I think it's going to be a dividing line for a lot of people. What did you do in the pandemic? Were you out there cheerleading the masks and things like that, like Darlene was? She's not somebody who, she doesn't know much about history or geography or science, but she'll take orders. And so she won the primary, unfortunately, yesterday. She's going to be replacing her brother. And it's most likely that the GOP will win the election in South Carolina. I don't see South Carolina voting for a Democrat, but that is, she's now won the Republican primary. So she's pretty much a shoo-in for the general election. When we come back, we're going to take a look at this situation with Mike Rogers and how he is protesting. Please don't give me any money. I don't want to be labeled as an AIPAC goy. But he would like to have some money. AIPAC still wants to give him money because they want to be seen as influencing this election. But he is still open to taking money from Jewish billionaires who are not directly associated with AIPAC. Because when that happens, AIPAC comes out and says, well, you label that as money coming from Zionists. That didn't come from us. So we're going to take a quick break, folks, and we will be right back. Stay with us.
But unlike most revolutions where the people rise against a real economic oppression, in our case here in Boston, we are fighting for purely an abstract principle. Hear, hear. It is, however, not nearly so abstract as the young gentleman supposes. The issue involved here is one of monopoly. Today, the British government will monopolize the sale of tea in our country. Tomorrow, it will be something else.
listening to The David Knight Show.
As a matter of fact, when we look at this election that's taking place in Michigan, the primary was won by El Sayed. He was opposed by someone who was very, very strongly pro-Zionist, Haley Stevens, and AIPAC spent $30 million. I mean, they spent the kind of money that they spent to get Thomas Massie out, but they failed in that primary. And we're increasingly seeing this is the outsized influence of a foreign government when our elections are turning on that very issue. Turning on that issue, turning on the flock cameras as well. And why is it that you can't win in Kentucky against that? Somebody who was very popular, somebody who had done all the things that Republicans and libertarians say they typically agree with. And yet he got taken out simply because of his opposition to Israel and because of tens of millions of dollars that came into that race. This is the real issue, folks. If you want to save the election, forget about the Save America Act. That's nothing but window dressing. The real issue is who's going to save America from being a colony of Israel. So after his primary visit, victory, he said, he taunted AIPAC. He said, if you're listening, come back and burn some more money. And so Rogers is saying, don't give me any money. I don't want to be seen as your puppet here. But make no mistake about it, he will be their puppet if he does get elected. Rogers' allies are urging AIPAC to use indirect ways to influence. AIPAC wants a visible role in it, however. So things have got a little bit dicey between Rogers and AIPAC. He's getting angry with him. Don't give me that money. Please do it through Jewish billionaire donors, the Jewish Republican donors. Let's keep it quiet and secret. In a Fox News poll, 55% of Michigan electorate want U.S. aid to Israel to stop altogether. The most heavily Arab precincts in East Dearborn, of course, went for the self-described peace candidate, Donald Trump, in 2024. What a change, huh? And so now you've got 45% of them voted for Trump, 29% voted for the Green Party, only 16% voted for Lala Harris. But now Trump has basically failed them as well, just like he's failed the farmers and the cattlemen and the small businessmen on Main Street and the consumers. So I guess, when you look at this, when they've got power, the first thing they do is they go after the First Amendment to silence people about what they're saying about Israel. And again, when you look at how this is metastasized, it's not just at the federal level. It is at the federal level. It is also at the state level. When we look at DeSantis, he flew to a foreign country to sign a bill in that foreign country, making it illegal to criticize that foreign country. And then he handed the pen that he signed the bill with to the leader of that foreign country. That foreign country, of course, is Israel. But now it is also at a lot of local levels as well. So we see it both the federal, the state, and the local level. You can't say anything criticizing a foreign government, Israel, or you are accused of being anti-Semitic. This is happening now in San Diego.
Anti-Semitism has been rising in San Diego and across the country. That's according to Jewish organizations and hundreds of speakers at Tuesday's San Diego City Council meeting. Liat Cohen-Reese directs a local anti-Semitism task force. She says defining it is the city's first step to better fight it.
Well, we need language. We need, in order to...
Yeah, they play games with language, don't they?
We need a definition. We need the language.
Nearly everyone who spoke agreed anti-Semitism needs to be combated. They disagreed on how to define it. The city adopted the definition of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, or IRA. It's been adopted by dozens of countries and cities across the U.S., including Los Angeles, Chula Vista, and El Cajon. It says anti-Semitism is, quote, a certain perception of Jews, which may be expressed as hatred. It includes 11 examples. 7 of them involve the state of Israel. Critics say the language has been used to silence criticism of Israel and support for Palestinians. One of those critics is Jewish council member Sean Elo Rivera. He says people must be allowed to both love Jewish people and speak freely against actions by the Israeli government.
A definition that cannot hold both of these things at once is not a tool for fighting anti-Semitism. It is a tool for silencing people who care about everyone.
He urged the council to consider other definitions.
Yeah, the bottom line is that this is a tactic that we've seen done over and over again. It's been done by the Jewish liberals who took over the institutions, marching through them in the way that Antonio Gramsci had put that out. Of course, the Jewish Bolsheviks in Russia, nearly all of the Bolsheviks in Russia were Jewish. But the Jewish people were a very, very small percentage of the Russian population. As Alexander Solzhenitsyn said, he said, yeah, they hate Russians. He said, they're not Russian, they're Jewish, and they hate Russians. The Bolsheviks do. But so we've had this type of approach where the Bolsheviks would do street revolutions, right? They're not doing that here in the United States. What they're doing is they march through the institutions, as Antonio Gramsci wargamed it. He was the founder of the Italian Communist Party. He said we should take over the institutions, take over entertainment, media, the press, schools, that type of thing. And that's exactly what we have seen. And what is the narrative that they use with that? Well, if you disagree with the liberals, you are racist, right? So if you disagree now with the conservatives who support Israel, the state of Israel, now you are racist. So they've got the same tactic, whether they're coming at you from the left or from the right. And of course, as they take over the institutions, they are using those institutions to essentially create a street gang. They want to divide and conquer the United States, and bringing in massive numbers of Muslims and other people from other countries as a way of destroying the cohesiveness, the culture, and the rule of law in our society, which allows them to then thrive. So it is a two-tier, two-prong approach that they have going on. And I guess when I look at this, how do they define being Jewish? It's so malleable, right? It can be an ethnicity, it can be a religion, it can be a political entity. And they'll put on a different hat depending on what they want to do in order to control you. But that was one of my big red flags. When they started coming after the First Amendment, it's like, okay, we're done. No excuses for any of this stuff. No quarter for it either. Let me read some of these comments we've got before we pass even further into this. Jason Barker, we were talking about the vaccines. He says, it's really hard to get people to do their own research. It's easier for them to put blind trust in a white coat. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Jason. Again, Jason Barker at Knights of the Storm. That's where you'll find his program. And that was the issue. That's what I wanted to talk about with Dolly Parton. Did she put blind trust in this? Was she used to get other people to put blind trust in what the medical establishment was lying to us about? That is the lesson that we can learn. We can't judge her life. We don't know anything about her except what we have seen. And everything that we see is curated. It's manufactured. It's the entertainment industry. It's all illusion. She understood that. She created a character and put that out there. But that's, we get some glimpses of maybe what the real Dolly Parton is like, but we still, if we don't personally know this person, we don't have any idea what they're like. So Molly Brown Dog said, this country wants to kill its young men one way or the other. mRNA or deployment to the Middle East both work as well for the District of Criminals. That's right. Boo said, my wife told me her employer at the hospital had said employees don't need a seasonal vaccine this year. It's the first time in forever. They're backing down. That's winning. Yes, you're right. I agree with that. They have created what Rand Paul was. I remember the hearings. I just couldn't believe Rand Paul was saying it. He said, Dr. Fauci, what you're doing with this vaccine is creating vaccine hesitancy. We don't want that. I said, I want it. I don't trust any of these vaccines. I don't trust the so-called science of virology at all. And I don't trust the way that they test and either the safety or the efficacy of the vaccines. And we have seen too much of a connection. Explain the fact that we need to have so many repetitions of these vaccines. Please explain that to me. And explain to me why no other developed country has to have that many, and why no other developed country has the kind of autism problem that we have here. Could there be a connection? Well, you're not even allowed to ask. If you're allowed to ask, you get kicked off of all these different platforms. Yes, they control that as well. We are controlled by some big corporations, by some foreign governments. That is what the American government has become. So when we look at this, what about hatred of non-Jews? We see a lot of that, don't we? Do they have a word for that? Is that maybe anti-Goyism? I see that present all the time when you look at these people who are hardcore Zionists. Here's an example of a guy who is an anti-Goyist.
Can't really argue that the Goyim are going to be annihilated. That's not really an option for all the Nevuahs, all the prophecies. And not only Goyim as individuals, you could say that we broke down their nationalities and they're all a bunch of Yechidim running around. No, as nations even, which you have Goyim, the Goyim of this nation and the Goyim of that nation. As Goyim, they're gone. Their personality, as they exist bifnei atzmam, as they would exist independently of Klal Yisrael, they don't exist. They're done. In modern terminology, they call it cultural genocide. There's a term for it by the progressives. It's called cultural genocide. And they talk use the word genocide. Not only as a nation they'll cease to exist, even as individuals.
Yeah, he likes that. He likes cultural genocide. He doesn't have a problem with genocide. Somebody put up a meme.
He gets so excited, he starts rocking back and forth at the idea.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, he can't contain himself. He just, this is great. We're going to kill all the Goyim. And when you look at this, he says, the progressives say this. He's not a progressive. He's going to consider himself to be conservative. But he's going to use the same tactics. And he has the same hate. How dare you talk about how our speech is hate when you directly come out and say that? And he's not an outlier. I mean, there is one, if you look on social media, you'll find one video after another of rabbis who are out there saying, we're going to take down the entire world. We're going to take down all the Goyim. And that includes American, and especially Christians. They consider us to be idolaters. They think we're in violation of their Noahide laws. Trump pardoned, by the way, a fellow Chabad gangster. This is the guy that he pardoned. He pardoned him the day after Hanukkah, or the last day of Hanukkah. And this is a guy who was given a 27-year sentence. He is a white-collar criminal like Jared Kushner and his family. He was convicted of financial fraud, but he was pardoned on the last day of Hanukkah 2017. He didn't give him an appointment, is I guess my surprise about he didn't give him an appointment in his regime like he did Jared Kushner's criminal father. He pardoned Jared's father and made Jared Kushner's father the ambassador to France. This guy kind of got the cold shoulder from Trump, I guess, compared to that. He is a kosher meat packer. His name is Rabbi Shalom Rabushkin. He had served only 9 years of his 27-year sentence. But as this person who put this up, Henry Makow, said, just remember that Trump refused to pardon Ed Snowden and Julian Assange. And he also refused to pardon Ross Ulbricht, if you remember, at the end of his first term as well. Well, there's other issues in terms of the control that is being exercised by Israel. Here's John Kiriakou. He's the CIA whistleblower who blew the whistle on CIA torture that was used to produce the lies about weapons of mass destruction that lied us into the Iraq War. And of course, the person who produced that quote-unquote intelligence, the lies based on torture, was Gina Haspel. And even though Trump said, we were lied into the Iraq War, and then he took the chief liar and the one who covered it up, and he made her director of the CIA. John Kiriakou, however, for pointing out the truth, he went to prison, and he didn't get a pardon. He served all of the time that they wanted him in there.
So I have a friend who is close to the president, and I said to him at the time that the documents were released, about a year ago, I said, thank God that the president finally released the remaining documents. And he said, no, he didn't. I said, yeah, he did. He was compelled by law. Congress passed a law twice demanding, compelling.
Yeah, like the Epstein files.
All documents related to the Kennedy assassination. He said, there are 10,000 documents that are never going to be released. And I said, why? And he said, because every single one of them points directly at Israel. And I said, oh man, that's not one that I was thinking of. He says that the Israelis were so angry that A, John Kennedy wouldn't give them nuclear technology. But more importantly, B, he was actively trying to disrupt the Israelis from acquiring nuclear technology. And they decided they had to take him out.
Well, there you go. So he's required by law to release these documents. Yeah. Does he follow any law? He was required by law to release the Epstein documents, but that also implicates Israel and him. And so, of course, those aren't going to see the light of day either. But again, don't you dare criticize what these people who are taking over our government and have taken it over, don't you dare criticize what they are doing, because if they do, you're going to get people like this other rabbi. He is, I call him Scumly No Teach. It's Chumley Boteach or something is his real name, but I call him Scumly because that's really what he is. That's his real business. This is what he has to say in terms of a violent threat against people that he considers to be critics of his government of Israel. People like Tucker Carlson. He makes a violent threat against him.
Let me be clear. For thousands of years, we Jews have developed an insidious mental construct that we need to be loved.
I never noticed that.
Now, that would be nice. Machiavelli said 500 years ago in Florence that you should want to be loved and feared. But if you have to choose, and October 7th has forced us to choose, then you need to choose being feared over being loved. The Jewish people have to be feared. Hamas has to fear the IDF. Hezbollah and disgusting, poisonous, reptilian Iran has to fear the Mossad. Just think about this for a moment. When Israel goes in the heart of Tehran and kills Ismail Haniyeh, and I feel really bad for him, because if I had $4 billion, I wish I could have lived longer and bought more hot tubs and more, Gulfstream 6s and all that wasted money now, which his children are now suing Erdogan for. When you do that in the heart of Tehran, what do you think Khamenei himself is thinking? He's thinking, uh-oh, I'm next. These Jews actually fight back. The same thing is true in media. Why aren't we going after the Candace Owens of the world, the most disgusting reptilian anti-Semite in America? Why aren't we going after Roger Waters? Why aren't we going after Tucker Carlson? President Trump, who spoke here at the IAC the other day, is the most pro-Israel president in American history. What the heck is he doing with Tucker Carlson in his ear? Tucker Carlson's a Holocaust denier. Tucker Carlson just had a historian on, 42 million people watched it, who said the Holocaust, he's not a Holocaust denier. He admits that 6 million Jews died, but it wasn't a program of genocide. They were like prisoners of war. They died of disease. Cut the crap and stop desecrating the memory of our 6 million.
You can't handle a debate, can you?
Whether it's Biden or George Bush or greatest president for Israel, Trump, should be having people like that. And we have to go after the Tucker Carlsons of this world. I am tired of being a scared Jew. I am tired of...
Yeah, right. He sounds scared, doesn't he?
And trembling before our enemies. We are going to bring the fight to our enemies.
This is a sex toy merchant who gets an audience with the Vatican. I mean, this guy is a poster child for them. And how dare him come after the First Amendment? If you can't handle... You think that you don't like Candace, you don't like Tucker, well, then... or the people that they have on, you've got the First Amendment, you can make your case for it. When you have to silence your opponents, that's an admission of weakness. You look weak, you sex toy merchant. You look incredibly weak when you demand that people be punished or canceled. What that tells me is that you can't defend the lies that you are selling people. And now they've got a new lie. Oh, October 7th, it's not 6 million, it's now October 7th. They continue to come up with these lies. And notice who he's talking. He loves Machiavelli just like you have Netanyahu who loves Genghis Khan, thinks he's greater than Christ. Well, I keep seeing from these Zionists and really understand that the issue here, I mean, you may not be a Christian, but the politics is all intertwined with the religion. That's what the Jews are doing with all this stuff. And the reason that they can get away with this is because they have deceived so many Christians. And the deception for the Christians as it is for everybody else. I see non-Christians who are beginning to look at Christianity with an even more disdain than they did before. In the same way, we got socialist and communist being enhanced by the stupidity of Trump, who identifies himself as a capitalist. The Republicans are destroying the idea of capitalism, and especially under Trump. So they're pushing us into socialism and communism in the same way that religiously these Christian Zionists are pushing people into an anti-Christian or an atheistic position. But you need to understand what the deception is on these Christians, so that even if you're not a Christian, you can at least respond to this. But especially if you are a Christian, you need to break off the shackles of lies that have been imposed on people. We see over and over again, they'll say things like, from Huckabee, the Jews gave us the Bible and all the rest of the stuff. No, he didn't. If you think the Jews gave us the Bible, then you think the Bible is man-made. God gave us the Bible. He gave us the Bible through the Jewish prophets. And what did the Jewish people of their day do? They killed them, didn't they? And look at what they did to Isaiah, according to oral tradition. Cut him in half. And one of the major prophets of the Old Testament in terms of the quantity of things that he wrote about, that's what they did, as Jesus said, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, how long do I put you under my wing? But you kill the prophets. And that's exactly what they've done. When you look at the Samaritans, as I pointed out the other day, it's very much like the argument about the Ashkenazi Jews. You had the northern 10 tribes of Israel were carried away into captivity, and they were carried away into Assyrian captivity, and the other 2 tribes remained. You had Judah and the tribe of Benjamin. That's why we call people Jews, because the ones who were able to keep their genealogy together, because they had a very carefully preserved genealogy at their temple, which was destroyed in 70 AD. They lost that genealogy, but they had a clear genealogical line. They thought that was really important. I don't think God thinks that's important, but they thought it was important. And so when the people started to come back after years of captivity and essentially assimilation, they started intermixing. So it was now an ethnically mixed group of people. They called them Samaritans. Their religion changed as well. You remember the woman at the well who was a Samaritan. She said to Jesus, well, you Jews worship God in Jerusalem, but we worship God at Mount Gerizim. And he said, it's going to be a time coming where it doesn't matter where you're going, right? To paraphrase this heavily, okay? But the bottom line is they had a whole different system, and the Jews despised them. And the point of the parable of the Good Samaritan that Jesus made was to point out the common humanity and to point out we're not going to judge people based on their ethnic purity. And we're not going to base them as to where they've got their temple or something like that. It's going to be the things that they do, what is in their heart, and their heart, whether it's turned toward God or not. We see this over and over again. As I pointed out yesterday, we got people, the liberals who hate God, they want to imagine themselves as God. This is clearly the case with the communists, right? And most totalitarian dictators. They seek to be omnipotent, omniscient, and they look at all the different omnis about God, and they seek to become all-powerful totalitarian themselves. And that's exactly what is happening with the technocracy right now. So all of this omniscient, omnipresent, omnipotent, they want all power, they want to be everywhere, and they want to know everything. And this has always been the desire of tyrants. If you've got somebody who wants those types of power, you've got somebody who wants to be God, not somebody who thinks he will answer to God. It is a disqualifying desire to see a person in leadership desire to have the kind of authoritarian powers that Trump and so many others of both parties want to have. Just like it is a disqualifier if somebody wants to shut down your free speech and then lecture you about how they are right. And that's what we continually see. So, as I pointed out yesterday, you got Tallarico saying God is not a Christian. You got an LGBT priest who says, I don't even like the word God. And yet we've got Christians, self-labeled Christians, self-labeled conservatives, who also call themselves Zionists, And they want to replace both God and Christ with the nation of Israel, or with an ethnic people, or they want to worship a holy land. Yeah, the Holy Land was holy in the sense that it was set apart. That was really what the original word meant. But there's nothing about the land that we should worship it exclusively. And yet this branch of rabbinical Judaism, which has replaced the Mosaic Judaism that was delivered, it's not just that they reject Christ, they reject Moses as well. And Christ made that clear in terms of the people at his time as well. But they have come up with a completely different religion. They don't look at what they call the Tanakh, the Torah, the prophets, and so forth. They don't look at that. They've come up with a series of opinions that are, in fact, written by men. They don't even claim that they are inspired of God. And so it is a man-made religion. It is not the religion that was delivered to them by God. And so we have a lot of people who, in my opinion, and this is a lot of Christian Zionists, we see this over and over again. You take people like Hagee, he's saying, well, Jesus really wasn't the Messiah. The Messiah is going to come again. And he was not the Messiah for the Jewish people. Absolute heresy. There's nothing at all. Don't pretend that you're a Christian and then reject the Bible. This is the problem that we have with Tallarico, isn't it? And an LGBT priest. If you're going to say, well, yeah, I'm a Christian, I'm a seminarian, like Tallarico says, or the other guy says, I'm a priest, well, then stop being a fraud about it. If you don't believe the Bible, then do something else. Start your own church and get rid of the label that is there. And so we have people who are pushing these genocidal, racist policies. They are idolaters. And it's really all based on a really bad twisting of Scripture. As a matter of fact, this is a heresy that not only puts something in the place of Christ, but it also puts a group in the place of Christ. It puts a political institution above Christ. It is an outright heresy. It is not important to oppose this in and of itself, but you're not going to break the spell of the Judaizers that have taken over the Republican Party and the conservatives and the MAGA movement for the most part. If you don't understand this, if you're taken in by this heresy that is at the root of all of this stuff, and even if you're not a Christian, you're not going to see peace, and you're not going to see a move to take back our country if people, a large portion of the people, are held captive by these lies that we see. And here's an example of this. You had Dinesh D'Souza, who went on to debate, and we'll talk about this when we come back because I don't want to interrupt it in the middle of it. But just to give you an idea where we're going, he had a debate with a guy who was not a dispensationalist. And I want you to hear some of the things that Dinesh D'Souza says. And of course, Joseph Farah, who started WorldNet Daily, it's now called WND, he had a stroke a few years ago. His wife has now taken over the thing, and their daughter was, I think, Alyssa Farah. She was on The View for a while. She's no longer even really a Republican, but they are hardcore admitted Zionist and proud of it. And so Joseph Farah's wife wanted to have Dinesh D'Souza on to try to recover how he badly lost in a debate. This is why they don't want you to have a First Amendment, folks. Exhibit A. We'll be right back. I'm just looking at this comment here from Bin Laden Bernanke. He says, the rocking rabbi is Kathy Lee Gifford's mentor. Really?
I'll have to look into that.
I didn't know that she was Jewish or had been Judaized, I guess we should say. But again, when we talk about Dinesh D'Souza, he's just written a book, and they talked a little bit about this in the interview that he had with WND. The book is called Stones Cry Out. And it's about the proof that the Bible is real that we see in archaeology. For the longest period of time, archaeology was really biblical archaeology. You could basically take the Bible and use it like a map to find these various places. I remember when we went to the British Museum, it was Travis got sick. It was a reaction to vaccines that he had just before he left, because I didn't know about that at the time. So Karen was staying with him in the infirmary there. We tried to make it to the museum, and but then as we got there, he was so sick that she stayed with him, and then I took Lance around. And so two of us looked at some of the stuff that was there. They had part of the pedestal of one of the big columns that was there at the Temple of Diana in Ephesus. And it was just a little tiny chunk of it, but you could still see the profile of the very bottom of the pillar. And the thing that the pillar itself rests on. And the scale of the thing was unbelievable. And you think about that and scale it up, it's like, can you imagine how big that temple was? And yet, Paul fearlessly stood up and declared the gospel of Christ there. How did they find that? Well, they basically re-engineered it backwards in terms of reading the Bible. Say, well, he was here, and it says that he did this and this. And so they kind of it helped them to find it based on some descriptions that were in the narrative, because it is true. And as Dinesh D'Souza points out, in the early 1800s, there was a line of criticism of the Bible done by academic scholars in Germany and the UK and other places, where they said, well, the Bible is just a made-up fairy story. We don't have any evidence that these civilizations that are referenced there, like the Hittites, for example, ever existed, and on and on and on. So what happened then was in the early around 1830s or so, they started doing some archaeology. They'd never gone really to look. And when they did go to look, they found it was there. And that was very important. So then they pivoted right away to evolution as a criticism of the Bible. We've seen this pattern happening over and over again. So the general premise of what Dinesh D'Souza was talking about was good. And we should all understand that the Bible is written about true events. And that's why God put it in a particular place that could be verified. And but it is not that we then make those things the focal point. The focal point is always to be Christ. And so as they look at this, they're trying to guess, well, why is it that we got people who don't worship the Jews, who don't worship the state of Israel? And it was kind of interesting to see their take on this. This is Farah and Dinesh talking about this very issue about Christian versus Jew. And let me just preface this by playing this clip from Mark Levin about Judaism and Christianity.
If you reject Judaism and you reject Christianity and you reject the link of the two, you reject the Bible. If you reject Judaism and Christianity and the brotherhood and the sisterhood of the two, not only are you rejecting our founding, you're rejecting our country.
You reject Christ.
Some other agenda.
End of story.
Whatever that agenda may be.
Don't talk to me about the Bible when you reject Christ. Christ was the subject of the Bible. Everything in the Old Testament pointed toward him. As I think it was Augustine who said, the Old Testament is, the New Testament is in the Old Testament concealed, and the Old Testament is in the New Testament revealed. They work together, and that is the importance of all of this. What Mark Levin is trying to do is he's trying to take over and subjugate Christianity, the same thing that Huckabee does. Oh, we gave you everything. You didn't give us anything. God gave that to us. Or it's not true. But I believe that it is true. And so you have the response from this is, let's see if I can find this here. Where did I put that? Okay. Is it over here? What Where are the ones that I gave you this one? Here it is right here. This is Joseph Farah's wife and Dinesh D'Souza puzzling over the idea that that there are people who think that there's not multiple ways to God. I mean, does this sound like Tallarico? Well, that's the fundamental idea behind dispensationalism. It's like, well, people in one age were saved one way, and in another age they were saved another way, and as Christians they're saved another way, yet another way. No, Jesus said, I am the way. No one comes to the Father but by me.
Attempt to appropriate and stamp upon Abraham a name that, by the way, wasn't even given by God. Christian wasn't given by God. People were called Christians in Antioch for the first time. It just seems that it smacks of some kind of manipulation. Noah wasn't a Christian. That's just a fact. Firstly, he didn't speak Greek. He didn't know the word Christos. He didn't know that was their word for anointed. If he was anything, or if Abraham was anything, he would be a Mashiach. He would be a follower of the Mashiach, not the Christ. Abraham didn't speak Greek either.
I think some of it must come from a kind of twofold resentment. The first resentment is, why should the Jews be the tree and we grafted it? Another way to put it is, why should they be the legitimate children and us the adopted children? So I know feel some rankling on these people's part against that. And I think the other thing is that they believe that there are Jews today, in fact, the majority, who reject Christianity. So they're like, well, why should we then embrace them if they reject us, or at least reject our faith? Well, and of course, the answer is that it is a peculiarity of Christianity that we incorporate the religious text of another religion, Judaism, completely into our canon, right? It's part of our Bible. It's part of the Christian Bible.
Where do I even start with something that is this twisted in terms he starts out with a twisted worldview, and then he tries to fit everything into it. He says, there's this resentment that, the Jews are the tree and we were grafted into it. That is not what the Bible says. Dinesh, go back and read it. The root and the branch is Christ. And when they talk about branches being grafted in or being regrafted back in, it talks about how the Jews were a branch that was broken off. But of course, they can be regrafted in if they want to join themselves to Christ, who is the tree. The Jews are not the tree. And we are not mixing in two different religions. And it's not that we're upset with them because they have rejected Christianity. No, they didn't reject Christianity. They rejected the Lord Jesus Christ. That is the issue. And it's not about groups of people. Oh, we don't like you because you rejected our group or whatever. Again, this is this ethnic group mentality, this mentality that it is a man-made religion, this idea that the Jews are the root and the foundation of our faith. That is absolutely a heresy. Christ is the foundation. Christ is the root and the tree. Everyone else is simply a branch at best. And then, of course, as they go back and she talks, Noah. Noah wasn't a Christian. And I wonder why she focuses on that. Is it because of the Noahide laws, the purported Noahide laws that are there? But no, as a matter of fact, this has blinded them to what really is the basis of salvation, and that is trusting in Christ. When Christ was being criticized by the Jews at the time, he said to them, Abraham is our father. He said, no, Abraham's not your father. Abraham saw my day and he was glad of it. He said, no, your father is the devil. Abraham would follow me, but you don't follow me. And basically they kill the prophets as well. And so the point is that Abraham was justified because of his faith. And that is exactly the point that is made in Galatians. I just don't understand when you go back and you look at the Christian Judaizers, people like Dinesh D'Souza, Farah, people like Huckabee. I don't understand what they do with Galatians. It's pretty clear there. It's also clear in the book of Hebrews that Christ put an end to sacrifices. It's not going to be another temple, that he is the temple, that he is the better high priest. They had a line of priests through Levi, but he was a different priest. And there was a an example of him being in the line of Melchizedek, as I point out, someone whose origin was not clear to people. He came and he was the Prince of Peace and so forth. So, and people will disagree somewhat about Melchizedek. Some people think it was a pre-appearance of Christ, or maybe it was just a type of what Christ would be. But the bottom line is he's saying that it's a different kind of priesthood. It was the Jewish religion was there. God gave that as a template to illustrate the work and the person of Christ. And it's all this nonsense about, well, they wouldn't have called themselves Christians. Of course they wouldn't. Oh, they didn't speak Greek and blah, blah, blah. That is...
They get into these ridiculous, asinine semantic arguments.
Yeah, it's absolutely, totally irrelevant.
It reminds me very much of the whole, well, can you define what a woman is? Let's stop pretending we need to do this and we don't all intrinsically understand this. We know what it means. We know what it is. We all know what we're talking about. And it's this attempt to get you lost in the weeds on these esoteric non-issues to divert you from what's really important.
And what is really important, right, folks, is even more important than the politics, is what is the means of our salvation. And there's a great deal of confusion about that by the Christian Zionists as well.
At one point of the debate, I said to him, I just quoted the line from Jesus where Jesus says very straightforwardly, salvation is from the Jews. And I said, what do you think? And he goes, well, obviously what it means is Jesus is saying salvation is through myself. And I go, wait a minute, Jesus could easily have said salvation is through me, but Jesus in fact says salvation is from the Jews. Now, Jesus is not saying salvation is only for the Jews, but he is saying, interestingly, it is from the Jews. So I would like you to try to parse or explain that statement, not the statement that you're making up, but the statement that's actually in the Bible. And he had great trouble with that because from his point of view, where he's trying to de-Judaize sort of Jesus, in regard to Abraham, the Bible says that Abraham had trust in God, faith in God, and God counted it to him as righteousness. It's a very interesting phrase, right?
Yeah. That's what the basis of our salvation is. And again, as I said, this is such a heresy in Christianity that it not only affects politics, not only gets these people to applaud genocide and the murder of civilians, the initiation of wars, killing people to take their land. When you look at what has happened with Zionism and with this heresy of dispensationalism, it has turned them into Judaizers. He said, yeah, you got these people who are de-Judaizers. They want to remove Jesus from the Jews. Well, he is not a subset of the Jews, first of all. But secondly, when he has an issue with that, the fact that Abraham believed God and God credited that to him as righteousness, that is the fundamental basis of our salvation. It's not going to be based on the works. Your salvation is not based on your ethnic identity. It's not based on your politics. It's not based on your works. Christ was very clear about that. He said, yeah, here's the law. Can you keep it? I mean, really keep it in your heart? You can go through life and not get angry with somebody else. Remember the rich young ruler said, yeah, I've done all that. I've kept all that stuff. And he goes, okay, well, now go sell everything that you got. And he goes away sad because his heart is based on his wealth. And he covets that stuff. That is his idol. And so Christ just cut right through all of that. But when you look at what is our basis for our standing before God, it's not going to be, I did this, I did that. None of that is going to be there for any of us. If you start out that way, it's going to be like Monty Python and the Bridge of Doom. You stumble and it's like, you get ejected. But no, it's going to be about what Christ did for you. Or it's going to be that you don't make it. It's just that simple. And to see people who are self-professing Christians tell you that, well, it's kind of interesting, but salvation is through the Jews. No, Christ said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but by me. And he understood that that was going to be something that was very offensive to people who thought they'd come up with a better way. And that's one of the same things that Talarico said. He said, I can't imagine that we've got a God that is so exclusive, Though we've got all these people have developed different ways to God. They've imagined, well, I think if I do this and this and this, then and follow those rules, then I'm going to be acceptable to God. No, God makes the rules. You don't make the rules. And what the Christian Zionists are doing in their dispensationalism is they're saying, well, we got different ways that people can be saved at different times. Noah and Abraham were not saved because they had faith in Christ. No, they were saved because they did this or they did that. I don't believe that is true at all. And again, it is yet another example of why they do not want to have debates. Because if you see the debate that Dinesh D'Souza had, he was massacred. It's one of the reasons why Farah had him on to try to help him. But we're going to take a quick break. As a matter of fact, before we take a quick break, I see a comment here from W. Thomas Smith. He says, well, the narrative in the movie Shenandoah that I just showed scenes from is that the South left because of slavery. Yeah, I don't believe that either. I think there was a different, I would say that was part of the economic reason, but the bigger part of the economic reason, as I've said many times, I think it goes back to the nullification crisis that happened in the 1830s, the tariffs of abomination, they called them. That was the first mercantilist approach, and the South Carolina nearly seceded with that. You had Andrew Jackson who pulled it back with a compromise, but I've used that as an example of why these things, the fourth turnings, happen on an interval of 80 years or so, because the population has to be of a certain mindset. Their faith in the institutions has to be of a certain point in time where they have started to lose faith in their institutions. That typically happens after about 4 generations. And so it was necessary. It was a little bit that same cause that was there, and that is the bigger cause, again, the bigger economic cause. When you go back and you look at what was happening in the 1860s in Italy, for example, they had a civil war at exactly the same time we did. And that was about the consolidation of the nation state, and it was about the Industrial Revolution and the industrialists replacing the agrarian society in terms of its importance and its wealth. And that was exactly the dynamic that was happening in the U.S. at the same time. Now, slavery was a part of it, and I don't think that it is a defensible practice. It was Christians who got rid of it. It was people like Wilberforce who first ended the slave trade, and then he ended the ownership of slavery. And the way they ended it was without a war. They didn't have a war in the Bahamas. They basically paid the people for the value of their slaves and liberated them that way. Abraham Lincoln could have liberated the slaves with less money than he spent on ammunition, not to mention all the lives that were lost on both sides. So that has become a narrative that's been put in to justify it in the past. But of course, when the people are writing this movie, they're going to be presenting you with a version of history that is a textbook version of history, not the actual thing that's there. But what I take away from that movie is the fact that you've got a family that whatever they thought the war was about or whatever side that they were on, you got a family that gets split along the line of this. And Jimmy Stewart plays a really gruff character in that. I don't think I ever saw him with a gruff character like that, except maybe was it Winchester 73, would you say he's kind of a rough character like that?
Not even there.
Yeah.
He's still very mild-mannered and upbeat about most things.
Yeah, throughout this whole movie, he's fed up and angry. And it's very easy to get that way when you start to see how people have maneuvered us into an unnecessary war. And so his sons take different sides on this. And then he's got another son who gets kidnapped and caught up in it. He just finds a cap that's floating, and he wears that, and they mistake him for a Confederate soldier and take him prisoner. And so Jimmy Stewart takes the family on a search to break him out. And as part of that search, one of his other sons gets killed. It truly is a tragic movie, but it is a good movie, I think, in terms of war and peace. We should think about this. We shouldn't enter into this lightly. That is what is one of the scariest things about our current leadership, how lightly they treat war and how they murder civilians at will. Just like not even at Gaza, look at Venezuela and look at what Trump and Hegseth did and bragged about it. These people, by every standard of law and morality, are war criminals and murderers of the worst sort. We'll be right back.
Liberty. It's your move. And now, The David Knight Show.
Well, welcome back. I want to talk a little bit about what's happening with the AI bubble and also with the data centers. We have the Democrat who's running against Governor Abbott. I talked about yesterday the fact that you had Governor Abbott in Texas, you had Governor Shapiro in Pennsylvania. Both of them were big cheerleaders for data centers. And now they're coming back and saying, well, we want to have a moratorium. We're going to work out some of these issues. So there is a major turn there, just as we have fortunately seen a major turn against vaccines. But when it comes to the data centers, this is an issue that the GOP is abandoning to the Democrats. And so the Democrat opponent to Greg Abbott, and I can only imagine what other policies she typically would support, but she's out there pushing against Abbott in terms of the trespass, the pollution, and the issues of a police state. And I think that the Republicans are really between Trump and supporting this police surveillance state that he is rolling out. They just reflexively say, well, if Trump wants it, it's good. And if businesses are going to make money from it, it's good. Well, that is not true. And if they're going to go down that route, it is going to destroy the Republican Party. But they're not much of an alternative to the Democrats anymore. The economist who called the 2008 crash says the AI bubble has less than a year to go. And of course, we had Gerald Celente called all this stuff as well. He typically doesn't put a timeline on it. As he points out, we got trends that we can identify. We can't predict the exact timing of these things. This guy's name is Steve Keen. He spent 2 decades telling anybody who listened that the markets are watching the wrong debt. And this week he put a clock on it. He said, I would give the bubble in AI less than a year to go. We're seeing this coming from another number of different quarters. Yesterday I talked about how Michael Burry, the guy behind who blew the whistle on the 2008 scam of securitization, he and some other individuals, as documented in the book and the movie, The Big Short, they saw the fraud that was happening there. They saw the collusion, the regulatory capture, and they put their bets down, but they realized that this was not going to work in the long run. But what they misunderestimated, and it nearly broke them, was they misunderestimated, doing a Bushism there. They underestimated the corruption and fraud and collusion that was inherent in the marketplace, and it nearly took them under. So what we're seeing here is that we see now Michael Burry, we see this guy, Steve Keen, we see Sam Altman. All these people are saying, well, this is not looking exactly the way that we thought it was going to look. I played for you a clip the other day of Ed Zitron, who said they're going to run out of capital. They've got capital expenditures, which they call CapEx, they shorten it up, that they want a plan of $1 trillion, and yet I can't see where they got any more access to capital than maybe about 130 or 40 billion. By his estimates, he thinks that they're about 87% short of the capex that they need. And he said when that stops, that's going to be like a game of musical chairs. Everybody's looking for some place to sit, and there's not enough seats. So NVIDIA is going even further. NVIDIA is basically turning themselves into a bank. They had been doing this circular investment, providing loans to other companies to buy their product. Now they're concerned about, I think, the solvency of these other companies. And so they created their own entity, funded it with, I think it was $7 billion, I pointed out yesterday. That will be the company that will buy their product as a last resort because they have so much funding. He said that in his estimation, people are looking at the wrong debt. He said everybody's looking at the $40 trillion debt of the federal government, and we should look at that. It's going to have massive impact on us. And we had Ray Dalio talk about how he thought the debt and death spiral of the dollar was beginning right now at this point. But he said he looks at the corporate debt. He said, we've got, he said, in 2010, the readers of his of Real World Economics Review voted on which economist had warned the earliest and the most clearly about the coming financial crisis that happened 2007, 2008. He came in first place ahead of Nouriel Roubini. He's got a book out, How Economists Will Destroy Capitalism. And I think they will. And I think it'll be corruption that destroys it as well. People are looking at this in terms of the, socialism and communism always appeals to people's greed and to their envy. And I think they're looking at the greed of the people in charge and the absolute corruption. And it is leaving a very bad taste in their mouth for what purports to be a free market, but isn't. It is crony capitalism. It is corruption. So he made the qualification. He said, I don't think this is going to be a banking-led collapse. I think this is going to happen when the credit disappears from all these different corporations. And he sees these data centers. He said, this is what I think is going to happen to the data centers. I think they're going to become big pickleball courts. We talked about that. He says, if you look at the real estate crash, he goes, so the house really had real value. It was something that was real. And even after the mortgage is gone, it's still going to be there after 30 years, most likely. And so it's something that's going to last. But he said, you look at these data centers. They are filled with GPUs that have a life of 3 years. After that point, they're going to be pretty worthless and obsolete. They're not going to be nearly as fast as the new stuff. And he goes, how are you going to keep this going if you don't have the customer base that is strong enough? And he doesn't see that happening. So he says, I think these data centers are going to turn into massive network of pickleball courts. Yeah, it will be a blight on the country. And as Trent Loos pointed out yesterday, he said, you look at everything they're doing. They're trying to destroy the farms, destroy the protein production with animals. They want to take the land. They want to use either solar farms or wind farms or data center farms, but they're going to take the rural land and push us off of it. Maybe then the people in the cities will be allowed to come back and play pickleball. Thank you for joining us.
The Common Man. They created Common Core to dumb down our children. They created Common Pass to track and control us. Their Commons Project to make sure the commoners own nothing. And the communist future. They see the common man as simple, unsophisticated, ordinary. But each of us has worth and dignity, created in the image of God. That is what we have in common. That is what they want to take away. Their most powerful weapons are isolation, deception, intimidation. They desire to know everything about us while they hide everything from us. It's time to turn that around and expose what they want to hide. Please share the information and links you'll find at thedavidknightshow.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. If you can't support us financially, please keep us in your prayers. thedavidknightshow.com.